The wrench slipped. Metal struck concrete with a sound like a gunshot, and every head in the drone hangar turned toward the woman kneeling beneath the reconnaissance aircraft. Elise Ward did not flinch. She did not apologize. She simply picked up the wrench, wiped the grease on her faded gray t-shirt, and continued adjusting the signal receiver as if 30 pairs of eyes were not burning holes through her back. She knew what they saw. A civilian contractor in dark jeans and worn sneakers, completely out of place among the precision machinery of Naval Air Station Coronado. Fair porcelain skin dusted with natural freckles, blonde hair pulled into a messy high bun, loose curls escaping to frame a face that belonged on magazine covers, not underneath military drones. Her slender fingers moved with a grace that seemed almost theatrical against the industrial backdrop of hydraulic fluid and carbon fiber. What they did not see was the thing that mattered. The receiver crackled, static hissed through her earpiece, and then something else cut through, a frequency that made her breath catch in her throat. Black code, bait, do not approach Zone 4. Ward's fingers froze mid-motion. The transmission lasted less than 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds changed everything. This was not an enemy signal. This was not foreign interference. This was an emergency beacon operating on a frequency reserved exclusively for naval special warfare operators. SEAL frequency. American frequency, coming from inside the base. She closed her eyes, running the voice through her memory like a forensic analyst examining evidence. Male, mid-30s, strained but controlled. The cadence of someone who had been trained to remain calm while describing the end of the world. Miller, Lieutenant James Miller. She had never met him, but she knew his voice from mission recordings. Everyone in certain circles knew Miller's voice. The same Lieutenant Miller who, according to official channels, had deserted 48 hours ago with nuclear activation codes. Ward pulled a secondary device from her toolkit. To anyone watching, it looked like a standard diagnostic tablet. She traced the signal origin, watching the coordinates resolve on her screen. North Tower, 500 meters away, inside this base. The deserter was not running. The deserter was here, hidden in plain sight while the entire Pacific Fleet hunted for him in the wrong hemisphere. She tucked the tablet away and stood slowly, brushing dust from her knees. Her mind was already calculating vectors, probabilities, the shape of a conspiracy that was only beginning to reveal its edges. But her face showed nothing. Her body language communicated only the mild irritation of a technician finishing an unpleasant task. That was when the sirens began. Red lights pulsed across the hangar ceiling. Personnel snapped to attention, conversations dying mid-sentence as the emergency alert echoed through the facility. Ward watched a young petty officer sprint past her toward the main doors, his boots pounding against the concrete floor like a countdown timer. She followed the crowd. The briefing hangar was already packed when she arrived. Rows of operators in woodland camouflage stood at rigid attention, their faces carved from stone. At the front of the room, standing on a raised platform beneath the American flag, was a man who radiated authority the way a reactor radiated heat. Admiral Richard Reese, 3 stars gleaming on his collar, silver hair cropped military short, jaw set like the prow of a warship. He surveyed his audience with the cold satisfaction of a man who had spent 30 years climbing toward this moment. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice filling the hangar without amplification, "we have a situation." Ward positioned herself near the back wall, half hidden behind a support column. She watched Reese's performance with the clinical detachment of a surgeon observing a colleague's technique. At 0400 hours yesterday, Lieutenant James Miller compromised this facility. He accessed classified systems, extracted nuclear launch authorization codes, and fled the base. Reese paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the assembled operators. Intelligence confirms he is currently hiding in the disputed zone near the eastern border. He is attempting to sell those codes to hostile actors. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ward saw hands tightening into fists, jaws clenching with righteous anger. Reese was good. He knew exactly which buttons to push. "SEAL Team 6 will deploy immediately," Reese continued. "Your mission is clear. Locate Miller, recover the codes, eliminate the threat by any means necessary." His eyes swept the room. "Any questions?" Ward stepped forward. The movement was so unexpected that several operators actually turned to look at her. She felt their confusion like static electricity on her skin. A civilian contractor, a woman in a gray t-shirt and jeans, speaking up in a classified military briefing. "Admiral Reese," her voice was quiet, but it carried. Reese's head snapped toward her, his expression shifting from surprise to contempt in the space of a heartbeat. "Who are you?" "Technical support," Ward said. "Communications systems. I intercepted a signal approximately 12 minutes ago, a beacon operating on SEAL emergency frequency." Reese's eyes narrowed. "And?" "The signal originated from the North Tower, inside this base." She let that sink in for exactly 2 seconds. "Lieutenant Miller is not in the disputed zone, Admiral. He is 500 meters from where we are standing." Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Then Reese laughed. It was a calculated sound, designed to humiliate. He stepped down from the platform and walked toward her, each footstep echoing like a verdict. The crowd parted to let him pass. By the time he reached her, every eye in the hangar was fixed on the confrontation. "Technical support," he repeated, savoring the words. "Communications systems." He circled her slowly, examining her the way a predator examines prey it has not yet decided to kill. "Let me explain something to you, sweetheart. I have satellite intelligence. I have signals intercepted from 3 allied nations. I have the full resources of the United States intelligence community telling me exactly where Miller is hiding." He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his aftershave, close enough to intimidate. "And you are a contractor with a toolkit and a pretty face." His lip curled. "What are you, Russian? You have that look. Cold, calculated." He glanced at the surrounding operators, inviting them to share the joke. "Go make coffee, darling. War is men's work." Ward did not step back. She did not look away. Instead, she met his gaze with an intensity that made several nearby operators shift uncomfortably. "I am not speaking about war, Admiral." Her voice remained perfectly level. "I am speaking about betrayal, and your rank is not high enough to hide it." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Reese's face transformed. The theatrical contempt vanished, replaced by something harder, something dangerous. "Security." 2 military police officers materialized at Ward's shoulders. "Escort this woman to hold. Charges of obstruction of military operations and suspected espionage." He turned away from her, already dismissing her from his attention. "The deployment proceeds as planned." The MPs gripped her arms. Ward did not resist. She allowed herself to be guided toward the exit, her expression unchanged, her breathing steady. But as she passed through the doorway, she looked back over her shoulder. Reese was watching. Their eyes met across the crowded hangar, and in that moment, Ward smiled. It was a small smile, private, the kind of smile that contains entire conversations, the kind of smile that said, "You have no idea what you just started." The holding cell was not a cell at all. It was a supply closet that had been hastily converted for temporary detention. Shelving units lined the walls, stacked with cleaning supplies and spare uniform components. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Ward sat on an overturned crate, her wrists secured in front of her, with standard-issue restraints. The guards had positioned themselves outside the door, their shadows visible through the frosted glass panel. She gave them 3 minutes to settle into complacency. Then she moved. Her watch was military grade, standard issue for field operatives. What the guards had not noticed was the hidden compartment beneath the face. Ward pressed a specific sequence of buttons, and the watch emitted a soft chirp. Ghost protocol, active. The display flickered, establishing an encrypted connection to a satellite network that did not officially exist. Ward's fingers flew across the tiny interface, composing a message that would reach exactly one recipient. Hades to Olympus situation, compromised Miller, located North Tower Team 6 walking into Trap Reese is hostile, requesting authorization for independent action. She waited. The seconds stretched like hours. Then the response arrived. Olympus to Hades. Authorization granted, all assets cleared for your discretion. Recover Miller, expose the conspiracy, protect the team. Ward deleted the messages, wiped the device memory, and reset the watch to its default display. Then she turned her attention to the restraints. Standard handcuffs, 7-pin tumbler lock. She had picked these exact restraints approximately 400 times during training. Her personal record was 7 seconds. Tonight, she did it at 5. The cuffs dropped to the floor with a soft clink. Ward stood, rolled her shoulders, and assessed her situation. One door, 2 guards, no weapons. Dozens of hostile personnel between her and the North Tower. She smiled again. This time, it was not private. This time, I was hungry. The first guard never saw her coming. She slipped through the door the moment he opened it to check on her, flowing past him like water through a crack. Her hand found the pressure point at the base of his skull. He collapsed without a sound. The second guard turned at the noise. He reached for his sidearm. He was fast. Military police fast. Ward was faster. She closed the distance in 2 steps, deflecting his draw with one hand while the other struck his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping. A knee to his temple put him down for good. 12 seconds. Both guards were unconscious, no alarms raised. Ward stripped the first guard of his security badge and radio, then moved into the corridor. The base was in a state of controlled chaos, personnel rushing toward the flight line where SEAL Team 6 was preparing for deployment. No one looked twice at a blonde woman in a gray t-shirt moving against the flow of traffic. She was invisible, irrelevant, exactly what she needed to be. The North Tower was a relic from the base's original construction. 3 stories of reinforced concrete that had once housed communications equipment, now officially designated as condemned and awaiting demolition. Unofficially, it was exactly the kind of place where you would hide something you did not want found. Ward approached from the east, using the shadows cast by the main hangar complex as cover. 2 sentries guarded the tower entrance. Not military police, private contractors. Black tactical gear, no identifying patches, weapons that were definitely not standard issue. She watched them for 90 seconds, memorizing their patrol patterns. Then she moved. The first contractor died without knowing he was in danger. Ward came up behind him during the gap between sweeps, her arm wrapping around his throat in a perfect chokehold. He struggled for 8 seconds before going limp. She lowered him gently to the ground. The second contractor heard something. He turned, weapon rising. Ward was already airborne. Her heel connected with his jaw before he could fire. He spun, hit the wall, and slid to the ground in a heap of body armor and unconscious limbs. She collected one of their radios, listened long enough to confirm their check-in schedule, then slipped through the tower door. The interior was dark. Emergency lighting provided minimal illumination, casting long shadows across walls covered in peeling paint and water damage. Ward ascended the stairs in silence, her sneakers making no sound on the concrete steps. She found him on the 3rd floor. Lieutenant James Miller was secured to a metal chair in what had once been a communications center. His face was swollen, one eye completely closed. Blood had dried on his uniform collar. He was tied with professional precision, the work of people who knew exactly how much pain a human body could endure without dying. His one good eye widened when he saw her. Ward put a finger to her lips. She crossed the room quickly, checking the corners for additional guards. Empty. They had assumed their external security was sufficient. Arrogant, sloppy, fatal. She knelt beside Miller and began working on his restraints. Up close, the damage was worse than she had initially assessed. Broken ribs, at minimum, possibly internal bleeding. He needed a medical facility, not a rescue mission. Who? Miller's voice was a rasp. He swallowed, tried again. Who are you? Ward did not answer immediately. She was focused on the final knot, a complex configuration that required careful manipulation. When it finally released, she helped him lean forward, supporting his weight. That was when he saw it, the small tattoo at the base of her neck, just above the collar of her gray t-shirt. 3 parallel lines intersected by a single horizontal bar, the mark of Hades. Miller's breath caught. His one good eye went wide with recognition, and something that might have been hope. You are Hades, he whispered, the ghost, the one they say does not exist. I exist when I need to. Ward helped him to his feet, steadying him when he swayed. Can you walk? I can crawl if it gets me out of here. He grimaced, pressing a hand against his ribs. Reese is going to kill Team 6. It is a trap. The whole thing is a trap. I know. Ward guided him toward the stairwell. Tell me everything. Miller talked as they descended. His words came in fragments, broken by pain and exhaustion, but the picture they painted was horrifyingly clear. Reese made a deal with the other side. I do not know who exactly. Someone with money, someone who wants war. They reached the 2nd floor landing. Ward paused to check the corridor before continuing. He grabbed me 2 days ago, planted evidence that I stole nuclear codes. But there are no codes. I never had access to anything like that. The story does not need to be true. Ward said. "It needs to be believed." "Exactly." Miller stumbled, and she caught him. "He sends Team 6 into the disputed zone, claiming they are recovering stolen weapons. The other side is waiting for them. They have legal justification to respond with lethal force. International incident. Accusations of American aggression." He laughed bitterly. "By tomorrow morning, we will be at war, and Reese and his defense contractor friends will make billions." Ward processed this information as they reached the ground floor. The timeline was tight. Team 6 was already en route. Once they crossed into the disputed territory, there would be no way to recall them, unless... "There is a transmission tower on the east side of the base," she said. "High-frequency array. If I can access it, I can send an abort code directly to the team. They will shoot you before you get within 50 meters of that tower." "Let me worry about that." She peered through the entrance doorway, checking the external perimeter. The two contractors she had neutralized earlier were still unconscious. No reinforcements yet. "First, I need to get you somewhere safe." "There is nowhere safe." Miller grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong despite his injuries. "Reese has people everywhere. Military police, base security. Half the command structure is in his pocket." Ward met his gaze. "Then I will have to be faster than all of them." They made it approximately 200 meters before the alarm started. The sound was deafening. Klaxons screamed across the base as floodlights snapped on, transforming night into artificial day. Ward pulled Miller into the shadow of a maintenance building, pressing them both flat against the wall. A patrol rushed past. Then another. Voices crackled over the radio she had taken from the contractor. "All units, be advised. 2 hostiles escaped from the North Tower. The female suspect was identified as the contractor from the briefing. Male suspect is Lieutenant Miller. Both are considered armed and extremely dangerous, weapons-free." Miller's face went pale. "They will kill us on sight." "They will try." Ward scanned their surroundings, calculating routes, evaluating options. The transmission tower was visible from their position, its antenna array silhouetted against the night sky. 300 meters away. She might as well have been trying to reach the moon. "I need to create a distraction." "How?" Before she could answer, a new voice cut through the chaos, a voice she recognized. Admiral Reese, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Attention all personnel, the terrorists have been located. They are attempting to sabotage our communications infrastructure. All available units converge on the east side of the base. These traitors will not escape American justice tonight." Ward smiled grimly. Reese had just made a mistake. By focusing all attention on the east side, he had left the west approach to the tower significantly less defended. "Change of plans," she said. "We circle around, come to the tower from behind." "That will take too long. The team..." "I know the timeline." She pulled Miller into motion again, guiding him along the building's shadow toward the western perimeter. "Trust me." The western approach was exactly as she had predicted. Minimal coverage. Most security assets had been pulled toward the expected threat vector on the east side. Ward and Miller moved through the gap like ghosts, staying low, using every available piece of cover. They were 50 meters from the tower when everything went wrong. The shot came from nowhere, a suppressed weapon, the report barely louder than a cough. Miller cried out and fell, clutching his leg where a round had torn through his thigh. Ward dropped beside him, scanning for the shooter. There, second floor of the adjacent building, a sniper, repositioning for a follow-up shot. She had maybe 2 seconds. Ward grabbed Miller and rolled them both behind a concrete barrier as the second shot sparked off the ground where they had been lying. She pressed her hand against his wound, feeling a hot blood pulse between her fingers. "Go," Miller gasped. "Leave me. Get to the tower. Quiet." She ripped a strip from her shirt, fashioning a crude tourniquet. The sniper would be moving to a new position, trying to get an angle on them. She had maybe 30 seconds before they were pinned down permanently. "Can you move at all?" "Maybe, not fast." "Fast is not the plan anymore." She secured the tourniquet, eliciting a hiss of pain from Miller. "Survival is the plan." She took stock of their situation. One sniper, known position, unknown number of reinforcements en route, one wounded asset who could not run, one objective that remained critical. The math was brutal. The math was clear. "Listen to me," Ward said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "There is a drainage culvert 10 meters to your left. It leads to the maintenance yard. You get in there, you stay hidden, and you do not come out until you hear the all clear. Do you understand? What are you going to do? Ward did not answer. Instead, she checked the contractor's radio one more time, then tossed it aside. It would only slow her down. She looked at Miller. This man she had never met, who had endured torture to protect information he did not even have. This man was willing to die to expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military command. The team needs to know, she said. They need to hear the abort code from a source they trust. When you get out of this, when this is over, you tell them what happened here. You tell them why. What are you going to do? Miller repeated. Ward smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had made a decision that could not be unmade. I am going to make them chase me. She moved before he could respond. Up and over the concrete barrier, sprinting directly toward the sniper's position. Every instinct screamed at her to find cover, to move tactically, to survive. She ignored all of it. The sniper fired. The round passed close enough that she felt the air displacement near her ear. She kept running. Voices erupted over the base intercom. Footsteps pounded behind her. The entire Western security grid was collapsing toward her position, exactly as she intended. Every eye, every weapon, every resource was focused on the crazy woman running straight at them. No one was watching the drainage culvert where Miller dragged himself towards safety. No one was watching the tower anymore. Ward reached the building where the sniper had been positioned. She did not try to enter. Instead, she veered right, heading for the fence line. Behind her, the pursuit was gaining. She could hear them now, their shouts mixing with the endless scream of the alarms. The fence was 12 feet high, topped with razor wire. Ward hit it at full speed, her hands finding purchase on the chain links, her body flowing upward with a grace that seemed to defy physics. The razor wire tore at her clothes, sliced into her palms, but she was through before the pain could register. She dropped to the other side and kept moving. The transmission tower loomed before her, its antenna array reaching toward the stars like a prayer. Ward's lungs burned. Her legs screamed for rest. She ignored everything except the door. She reached it. The control room was exactly as she remembered from the base schematics. Banks of equipment lined the walls, their indicator lights blinking in the darkness. Ward's fingers flew across the console, bypassing security protocols, accessing the emergency broadcast system. The screen flickered to life. Enter authorization code. She typed without hesitation. 17 characters, a code that existed in no database, known only to those who walked in shadows. Hades protocol recognized broadcast ready. Ward opened the channel. Her voice was steady despite the chaos outside. Abort, abort. This is Hades. Team 6, do not enter the disputed zone. I repeat, do not enter. It is a trap. Acknowledge. Static. Nothing but static. She tried again. Team 6, this is Hades protocol. Abort mission. Acknowledge. The door behind her exploded inward. Ward spun, drawing a sidearm she had taken from one of the contractors. 3 security officers rushed through the opening. She dropped the first with a shot to the shoulder. The second caught her kick to the chest. The third tackled her against the console. She fought like a woman possessed. Elbow to the jaw, knee to the groin. Her free hand reached back, holding the transmit button down even as they tried to tear her away from the equipment. Team 6, abort! Abort! More hands grabbed her. Too many. They pinned her arms, her legs, dragged her backward. But she had bought 3 more seconds. 4, 5. Then Admiral Reese walked through the shattered doorway. His face was calm, almost amused. He surveyed the scene with the detachment of a man watching insects struggle against glass. Enough, he said quietly. One of his men raised a rifle and slammed the butt into the transmitter. Sparks erupted. The screen went dark. The equipment died with a sound like a final breath. Reese stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete floor. He crouched down until his face was level with hers. Too late, he said, savoring each word. Team 6 entered the dead zone 8 minutes ago. No signals in, no signals out. His smile widened. Tomorrow morning, I will announce that you and Miller are the spy couple who sold them out. The nation will mourn their heroes, and you will be remembered as the traitor who killed them. Ward spat blood onto his uniform. Reese did not flinch. He simply stood, adjusted his collar, and nodded to his men. Take her to the briefing room. Make sure she looks the part of a captured terrorist. They hauled her to her feet. Her hands were wrenched behind her back and secured with restraints that bit into her wrists. Her blonde hair had fallen completely loose. tangled and wild around her face. Her gray t-shirt was torn, smeared with dirt and blood. They dragged her down the corridor. Her sneakers scraped against the floor, leaving marks that no one would remember. Personnel stepped aside as they passed, their faces showing mixtures of contempt and curiosity. The traitor, the spy, the woman who had betrayed her country. None of them knew the truth, not yet. But Ward's watch was still transmitting, the Ghost Protocol was still active, and somewhere out there, someone was listening. The question was whether they would act in time. The briefing room was exactly as she remembered it. Blue chairs arranged in neat rows, flags standing at attention against the back wall, a raised platform where Reese would soon declare his triumph to the world. They threw her into a chair at the front of the room. Minutes later, they brought Miller, barely conscious, and deposited him beside her. His wound had been roughly bandaged. No one had bothered with pain medication. Armed guards positioned themselves at every exit. Reese conferred with his officers at the back of the room, their voices too low to hear. Outside, the first hints of dawn were painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Ward looked at Miller. His one good eye met hers. "Did you get the signal out?" he asked, his voice barely audible. She shook her head. Miller closed his eyes. His shoulders slumped. The fight seemed to drain out of him. "Then it is over," he said. "We failed." Ward did not respond. She was watching the door, waiting, the smallest spark of hope still flickering in her chest, because she had learned a long time ago that the game was never truly over until someone said it was, and she was not ready to say those words yet. The door opened. A young communications officer rushed in, his face ashen with shock. He whispered something to Reese. Ward watched as the Admiral's expression transformed. Something was happening, something he had not expected. The game was not over. It was just beginning. The communications officer's words hung in the air like smoke from a detonation. Ward could not hear what he said, but she could read the effect on Reese's face. The Admiral's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered toward her for just a moment before he regained control. "Confirm that report," Reese ordered, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "And get me a secure line to forward operations." The officer saluted and disappeared. Reese turned to face the room, his expression settling back into its mask of authority. But Ward had seen beneath that mask. She had glimpsed the fear. Something had changed, something he had not anticipated. The briefing room began filling with personnel, SEAL operators who had remained on base during the deployment, support staff, officers of various ranks. They filed in silently, taking seats in the blue chairs, their faces carved from uncertainty. Word had spread that something significant was happening, but no one seemed to know exactly what. Ward watched them enter. These men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting a nation that would never know their names. These warriors followed orders without question, trusting that their commanders had their best interests at heart. That trust was about to be tested. Reese ascended the platform at the front of the room. He stood beneath the American flag, bathed in the harsh fluorescent light, looking every inch the heroic military leader. The 3 stars on his collar gleamed like promises. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice resonant with false gravity, "we gather this morning under circumstances that pain me deeply. 2 days ago, one of our own betrayed us. Lieutenant James Miller compromised our most sensitive security protocols and fled with information that could spark a global conflict." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the assembled personnel. "Thanks to the vigilance of our security forces, Miller has been apprehended." He gestured toward where Miller sat, broken and bleeding. But he did not act alone. This woman, who infiltrated our base under the guise of a civilian contractor, is his accomplice. Together they plan to sell American secrets to our enemies. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ward felt the weight of their stares, the judgment in their eyes. Reese was good at this. He knew how to weaponize loyalty. "In approximately 45 minutes, Reese continued, SEAL Team 6 will reach the disputed zone. They will recover the stolen materials and neutralize any hostile forces they encounter. When they return, these 2 traitors will face a military tribunal for their crimes against the United States of America." He let the silence stretch, savoring the moment. "Does anyone have questions?" Ward raised her head. Her wrists were still bound, her clothes torn and bloodied, her face streaked with dirt. But her voice, when she spoke, was perfectly clear. "I have a question, Admiral." The room went still. Reese's eyes narrowed. "The prisoner will remain silent. If Lieutenant Miller stole nuclear codes, Ward continued as if he had not spoken. "Why is he still alive? Standard protocol for a suspected nuclear security breach is immediate termination of the compromised asset. No interrogation, no extraction, termination." She tilted her head slightly. "Unless, of course, the story about the codes was never true." "I said silence. And if the codes were never real, then what exactly is Team 6 flying into?" Ward's voice rose, cutting through the room like a blade. "What is waiting for them in the disputed zone, Admiral? Who did you make a deal with?" Reese's face contorted with rage. He descended from the platform in 3 quick strides, his hand raised to strike her. The blow never landed. The door crashed open. Every head in the room turned toward the entrance. The communications officer stood there, white as a sheet, his tablet clutched in trembling hands. "Admiral Reese," his voice cracked. "Sir, Team 6 has turned back." The silence that followed was absolute. Ward saw Reese's hand freeze in midair. She saw the blood drain from his face. "What did you say?" "They received an abort signal, sir. Hades protocol. They reversed course 12 minutes ago. They never entered the disputed zone." Reese spun toward Ward, his eyes blazing with fury and something else, something that looked very much like terror. "That is impossible. Her equipment was destroyed. I watched them destroy it. She never sent any signal." Ward smiled. It was a cold smile, a victorious smile. "I did not need to send the signal myself, Admiral. I just needed to stay alive long enough for someone else to send it for me." Before Reese could respond, new sounds echoed from outside the briefing room. Footsteps, many of them, moving with the precise rhythm of a military formation. The doors opened again. The entourage that entered the briefing room carried an authority that made Reese's 3 stars look like participation ribbons. 8 men in full dress uniform, their chests heavy with ribbons and medals earned across decades of service. They moved in perfect formation, clearing a path for the figure at their center. Fleet Admiral Thomas Harrington was 73 years old. He had served in 4 conflicts, commanded 3 carrier groups, and shaped American naval policy for 2 administrations. His hair was silver, his bearing ramrod straight, and his eyes held the weight of every decision that had ever kept him awake at night. He wore a service dress blue. The dark vest contrasted sharply against the golden gleam of his rank insignia. Every medal on his chest represented lives saved and lives lost. Every ribbon told a story that would never be declassified. Behind him came more officers, captains, commanders, the entire Pacific Fleet command structure, descending on this base like judgment incarnate. Reese tried to recover. He snapped to attention, his hand rising in salute. "Admiral Harrington, sir, I was not informed of your arrival. If I had known..." Harrington walked past him without acknowledgement. The Fleet Admiral's path took him directly toward the front of the room, toward the 2 prisoners who sat bleeding in their chairs, toward the woman in the torn gray t-shirt whose blonde hair had fallen from its bun, whose fair skin was smeared with dirt and blood, whose blue eyes tracked his approach with perfect calm. The armed guards who had been watching Ward suddenly seemed uncertain. They looked to Reese for guidance, but Reese was frozen in place, his salute still hanging in empty air. "Release her," Harrington said quietly. No one moved. "I said release her." The command carried the force of a detonation. Guards scrambled to comply, their fingers fumbling with Ward's restraints. The cuffs fell away. Ward rubbed her wrist slowly, working circulation back into her hands. She did not stand, not yet. Harrington stopped directly in front of her chair. He looked down at her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. Then, in a movement that seemed to defy the laws of military hierarchy, Fleet Admiral Thomas Harrington came to attention. His heels clicked together. His spine straightened to perfect verticality. His hand rose to his brow in the most formal salute the United States Navy could render. He was saluting her, the woman in the gray t-shirt, the civilian contractor, the prisoner who had been moments away from a traitor's tribunal. Behind him, like dominoes falling in slow motion, the other officers followed suit. Captains, commanders, men who had commanded ships and directed operations and shaped the course of nations. One by one, they snapped to attention and raised their hands in tribute. The SEAL operators in the blue chairs rose to their feet. Their boots stamped against the floor in unison. Their hands came up as one. The sound of it filled the room like thunder. Dozens of military personnel, standing at rigid attention, saluting a woman who looked like she had just lost a fight with a hurricane. Ward rose slowly. She straightened her torn shirt. She pushed her tangled blonde hair back from her face. And then, with a dignity that seemed almost impossible given her appearance, she returned the salute. "At ease," she said quietly. The room relaxed by degrees, arms lowered, bodies shifted, but no one sat. No one looked away. Harrington's weathered face softened into something that might have been pride. "Welcome back, Commander Ward. You have been missed." Commander. The word rippled through the assembled personnel. Ward saw the realization dawn on face after face. The civilian contractor was not a civilian. The technical support specialist was not technical support. She was one of them. She had always been one of them. Reese found his voice at last. "Admiral Harrington, I demand an explanation. This woman is a security threat. She assaulted military police. She aided a deserter. She saved 16 lives tonight." Harrington's voice was quiet, but it silenced Reese instantly. "Your 16 lives, Admiral. The men you were sending to die. That is absurd. I was conducting a recovery operation. You were conducting a murder." Harrington turned to face Reese fully, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Did you think we would not find out? Did you think the intelligence community would not notice the irregularities in your operation? The off-book communications? The private contractors on a military base?" Reese's face went gray. "I do not know what you are talking about. Let me enlighten you." Harrington nodded to one of his aides, who produced a tablet and began reading. 3 weeks ago, you established contact with representatives of a hostile foreign power. You proposed a deal. You would manufacture evidence of American aggression in the disputed zone. They would respond with force, creating an international incident that would require full military mobilization. The resulting contracts would funnel billions of dollars to defense companies in which you hold significant financial interest. The aide swiped to a new screen. To accomplish this, you needed a scapegoat. Lieutenant Miller was selected because he had access to communications systems and a security clearance high enough to make the theft of nuclear codes believable. You abducted him, planted false evidence of his desertion, and prepared to send SEAL Team 6 into an ambush from which no one was expected to return. Another swipe. What you did not anticipate was Commander Elise Ward, call sign Hades, Naval Intelligence Special Operations. She was inserted into your base 6 months ago to investigate reports of corruption in the Pacific Fleet Command structure. When she intercepted Miller's distress beacon, she recognized the trap you were setting. She attempted to warn Team 6 directly. When that failed, she activated the Ghost Protocol, which transmitted her location and situation to our monitoring station. We dispatched the abort signal to Team 6 while she kept you focused on her capture. Harrington set the tablet aside. You thought you were hunting her, Admiral. She was hunting you, the entire time. Reese stood motionless. His face had gone from gray to white. His hands trembled at his sides. "This is fabrication," he said, but his voice had lost its authority. "This is a conspiracy against me. I have served this country for 30 years. I have medals, commendations. You have nothing." Ward stepped forward, and Reese actually flinched away from her. "You have a Swiss bank account with $47 million in it. You have encrypted communications with foreign intelligence services. You have the blood of every operator you were willing to sacrifice on your hands." She stopped directly in front of him. Up close, the contrast between them was almost absurd. He in his immaculate uniform, she in her torn and bloodied civilian clothes. He with his stars and ribbons, she with dirt on her face and cuts on her palms. But there was no question who held the power. "I told you," Ward said softly. "My rank is higher than yours." Reese's composure finally shattered. He lunged at her, his hands reaching for her throat. He never made contact. Ward moved like water, like shadow, like something that existed between heartbeats. She caught his wrist, redirected his momentum, and put him on the floor in a single fluid motion. Her knee pressed against his spine. Her hand locked his arm in an angle that promised agony if he moved. "Richard Reese," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent room, "you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice too numerous to list. You have the right to military counsel. Anything you say will be used against you in a tribunal." She looked up at the assembled personnel. "Somewhere get me handcuffs. The good ones this time." 2 security officers rushed forward. Ward secured Reese's wrists herself, cinching the restraints tight enough to leave marks. Then she rose and stepped back, watching as they hauled him to his feet. He looked smaller now, diminished. The 3 stars on his collar seemed like costume jewelry. "Take him to the store," Harrington ordered. "Maximum security. No communications, no visitors. He speaks to no one until the tribunal convenes." They dragged Reese toward the door. As he passed Miller, still slumped in his chair, the wounded lieutenant raised his head. "Admiral," Miller's voice was weak but steady. "You forgot something." Reese paused, confusion flickering across his face. "War is not men's work," Miller said. "War is everyone's work. And you just lost yours to the woman you told to make coffee." The door closed behind Reese. The sound of it was like a period at the end of a very long sentence. The aftermath unfolded in a blur of activity. Medical personnel descended on Miller, stabilizing his injuries before transport to the base hospital. Intelligence officers began securing evidence, cataloging the conspiracy that had nearly toppled nations. Communications specialists worked to restore normal operations, their fingers flying across keyboards as they untangled Reese's web of deception. Through all of it, Ward remained at the center. She answered questions, provided context, filled in gaps that only she could fill. But her eyes kept drifting to the window, to the sky that was now bright with morning sun. Team 6 was coming home. She heard the helicopters before she saw them. The distinctive thrum of rotor blades cutting through air, growing louder with each passing second. She walked outside, drawn by a force she could not name. The aircraft touched down on the flight line in perfect formation. 16 operators emerged, their gear still configured for the mission they had never completed. They moved with the casual efficiency of professionals who had accepted death and found themselves unexpectedly alive. Ward stood at the edge of the tarmac, watching them approach. Her torn gray t-shirt flapped in the rotor wash. Her blonde hair whipped around her face. The team leader saw her first. He was a mountain of a man, his beard streaked with gray, his eyes holding the weight of 100 missions. He stopped 20 feet away, and his team stopped with him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the team leader walked forward. He stopped directly in front of Ward, close enough to see the cuts on her palms, the exhaustion in her eyes, the quiet strength that no amount of physical damage could diminish. "Hades," he said. "Chief, they told us what you did." His voice was rough with emotion he would never fully express. "They said you let them capture you, that you made yourself the target so Miller could escape, that you almost died keeping them busy while the abort signal came through." Ward shrugged. The movement sent pain shooting through her shoulders. She ignored it. "The mission was protecting your team. The method was flexible." The chief stared at her for another long moment. Then he did something Ward had never seen him do in 15 years of knowing his reputation. He smiled. "You know," he said, "when they told us a female intel officer was going undercover as a drone technician, we all thought it was a joke. We figured you would last maybe a week before someone caught on." He shook his head slowly. 6 months. You spent 6 months fixing drones and making coffee and letting everyone think you were just some pretty face who wandered in off the street, all while you were hunting the corruption that almost killed us. He extended his hand. Ward took it. His grip was firm, calloused, warm with the heat of survival. "Anytime you want to transfer to Team 6, he said, "there is a spot waiting." "I appreciate the offer." Ward released his hand. "But I think I prefer working alone, less paperwork." The chief laughed. It was a real laugh, deep and genuine, and it seemed to release something that had been coiled tight in the atmosphere. His team members relaxed, exchanging glances that communicated more than words ever could. They had been dead men walking. Now they were alive, and they knew exactly who to thank. One by one they approached Ward. Some offered handshakes, others simply nodded, a warrior's acknowledgement of a debt that could never be repaid. A few murmured words of gratitude, their voices rough with emotions they were not accustomed to expressing. Ward accepted each gesture with the same quiet grace. These were her people. This was her family, not by blood, but by something stronger, by the bond of those who had stood in the darkness and held the line. By the time the last operator had passed, the sun was fully up. Ward stood alone on the tarmac, bathed in golden light, feeling the warmth seep into her battered body. "Commander Ward," she turned. Admiral Harrington had approached without her noticing, which told her exactly how exhausted she was. "Sir?" "Medical wants to see you. Multiple lacerations, possible concussion, and whatever else you managed to accumulate during your adventure tonight." He paused. That was not a suggestion. Understood. Ward made no move toward the medical building. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. Reese was not working alone. The conspiracy he built required resources, contacts, and protection that no single admiral could provide. Someone above him knew. Someone helped. Harrington's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. We are aware. I want the assignment. Commander, you have been operating undercover for 6 months. You were captured, beaten, and nearly killed less than 8 hours ago. The appropriate response is rest and recovery, not another mission. With respect, sir, I know how these networks operate. I know the signatures, the communication patterns, the financial trails. If you assign someone else, they will need months to get up to speed. Months during which the people responsible will be covering their tracks. Harrington studied her for a long moment. Ward met his gaze without flinching. You remind me of your father, he said finally. Ward felt something tighten in her chest. Sir? Thomas Ward, captain of the USS Defiance, lost in the Pacific 23 years ago during an operation that officially never happened. Harrington's voice softened. He was the same way. Could not let go of a mission until it was finished. Could not rest while there was still work to be done. Ward said nothing. There was nothing to say. Her father's death had shaped the trajectory of her entire life. The daughter of a hero, raised to carry a legacy she had never asked for, but would never abandon. The assignment is yours, Harrington said. After medical clearance, after a minimum of 72 hours rest, not negotiable. Understood, sir. And, Commander? He paused, something almost paternal crossing his weathered features. Whatever you find out there, whatever darkness you uncover, remember that you are not alone. The people you save today will follow you anywhere. Never forget that. He turned and walked away, leaving Ward alone with the sunrise and the weight of everything that was still to come. She stood there for a long time, feeling the warmth on her face, listening to the distant sounds of a base returning to normal operations. Somewhere behind her, Reese was being processed for detention. Somewhere nearby, Miller was receiving the medical care he desperately needed. Somewhere in the sky, 16 men were calling their families, telling them they would see them soon, because of her. Ward touched the small tattoo at the base of her neck. 3 parallel lines intersected by a single horizontal bar. The mark of Hades. The symbol of those who walked between worlds, who moved through shadows, who did the necessary work that daylight could not bear to witness. She had chosen this path. She had accepted its costs, and she would continue walking it until there was no more darkness left to fight. The helicopter was waiting when she finally made her way across the tarmac, black, unmarked, the kind of aircraft that existed only in budgets that would never be audited. A man in civilian clothes stood beside it, his face carefully neutral. Commander Ward, your transport is ready. Medical first, Ward said. Admiral's orders. The man nodded. Medical care has been arranged at the facility. They have a full team standing by. Of course they did. The intelligence community took care of its own, especially the ones who had just prevented an international catastrophe. Ward climbed into the helicopter. The interior was sparse but comfortable, with seats designed for long flights and equipment lockers that probably contained things she did not want to think about right now. As the rotors began to spin, she looked out the window at Naval Air Station Coronado one last time, the base that had been her home for 6 months. The place where she had played the part of a civilian contractor so convincingly that even she had sometimes forgotten who she really was. She would not miss it, but she would remember it. She would remember the hangar where she had intercepted Miller's signal, the briefing room where Reese had sneered at her, the North Tower where she had found a dying man who refused to break, the tarmac where 16 warriors had thanked her for their lives. She would remember all of it. The helicopter lifted off, banking toward the east, toward the rising sun, toward whatever came next. Ward closed her eyes. For the first time in 6 months, she allowed herself to rest. The dream came, as it always did. She was 8 years old, standing on a pier, watching a ship disappear over the horizon. Her father was on that ship. He had promised to return. He had promised to take her sailing when he got back, just the two of them, out on the open water where no one could find them. He never came back. The Navy sent a flag, a letter, a medal that meant nothing to a little girl who just wanted her father to walk through the door. She kept the medal in a box under her bed. Every night for a year, she would take it out and hold it, trying to feel some connection to the man who had given everything for a country that would never acknowledge his sacrifice. The dream shifted. She was 18 now, standing in front of a recruitment office. The recruiter was saying something about opportunities, about service, about making a difference. She was not listening. She was looking at the poster on the wall behind him. The Navy needs heroes. She signed the papers that day, not for the opportunities, not for the service, for him, for the father who had died in shadows, whose story would never be told, whose sacrifice would never be honored except by those who knew where to look. The dream shifted again. She was 26, completing her final training exercise, her body pushed beyond every limit she had ever known. The instructor was screaming at her, telling her she was not good enough, that she would never be good enough, that women did not belong in special operations. She finished the exercise 30 seconds ahead of the second-place finisher, a man. The instructor never apologized. He did not have to. The results spoke for themselves. The dream shifted one final time. She was standing in darkness, surrounded by faces she recognized, her teammates, her brothers and sisters in arms, the ones who had stood beside her through missions that would never be acknowledged, through sacrifices that would never be honored. They were smiling. Her father was there too, standing at the back of the group. He looked exactly as she remembered him, tall and strong and proud. He was wearing his dress whites, the same uniform he had worn the day he shipped out for the last time. He did not speak. He did not have to. He simply nodded. Ward woke to the sound of the helicopter touching down. She was at the facility, a nondescript compound somewhere in the Virginia countryside, hidden behind layers of security and classification that would make even the most determined investigator give up in frustration. Home. The medical took 2 hours, 17 stitches for the lacerations on her palms, treatment for mild concussion, antibiotics for the various scrapes and cuts she had accumulated during her adventure. The doctor, a woman who had been patching up intelligence operatives for 30 years, worked in silence, asking no questions, offering no commentary. When it was over, Ward was escorted to quarters that had been prepared for her. A small room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out on nothing in particular. Spartan but comfortable. Everything an operative needed and nothing they did not. She stood at the window for a long time, watching the shadows lengthen as afternoon gave way to evening. Somewhere out there, the conspiracy continued. The people who had enabled Reese were still operating. The network that had almost started a war was still intact. 72 hours. That was what Harrington had ordered. 72 hours of rest before she could begin the hunt. It felt like an eternity. Ward turned away from the window and sat on the edge of the bed. Her body ached. Her mind was racing. Sleep seemed impossible, even though she knew she needed it. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the only personal item she had brought from the base. A small medallion on a chain, worn smooth by years of handling. On one side, an anchor. On the other, 3 words that had become her mantra. Honor, courage, commitment. Her father's medallion. The one he had given her mother before his final deployment. The one she had carried through every mission, every operation, every moment of darkness. She pressed it to her lips, a ritual she had performed 1,000 times before. "I am still here," she whispered. "I am still fighting." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that could not be said, everything that had been sacrificed, everything that still remained to be done. Ward lay back on the bed, the medallion clutched in her hand. This time, sleep came quickly. And this time, there were no dreams. 3 days later, Commander Elise Ward walked into a briefing room at CIA headquarters. She was wearing a black suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a professional bun, bearing every inch the senior intelligence officer she truly was. The cuts on her palms had begun to heal. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow. The fire in her eyes had not diminished at all. Admiral Harrington was waiting for her, along with representatives from 6 intelligence agencies. They rose as she entered, a gesture of respect that would have seemed impossible a week ago. "Commander Ward," Harrington gestured to a seat at the head of the table. "Thank you for joining us." Ward remained standing. "The network that supported Reese extends across 3 continents," she said without preamble. "I have identified 17 high-value targets who require immediate attention. With your permission, I would like to begin operations within 48 hours. Harrington exchanged glances with the other officials. "You have full authorization," he said. "Resources, personnel, whatever you need. The President has made this a priority." Ward nodded. Then we have work to do. She sat down and opened the folder in front of her. The faces of her targets stared back at her. Men and women who had traded their oaths for profit, who had gambled with the lives of soldiers for financial gain, who believed themselves untouchable. They were about to learn otherwise. The ghost was hunting again, and this time there would be no escape. The final image, Ward walking out of the briefing room, silhouetted against the afternoon light. Her steps were measured, purposeful, carrying the weight of everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. Behind her, the officials watched in silence. One of them, a younger analyst who had only heard rumors about the operative called Hades, leaned toward his colleague. Is she really as good as they say? The colleague, a veteran who had seen careers rise and fall across 3 decades, simply smiled. Better, he said, and the people she is going after have no idea what is coming. Outside, Ward paused at the entrance of the building. She looked up at the sky, blue and cloudless, stretching toward a horizon full of possibilities. Somewhere out there, her enemies were planning their next move. Somewhere out there, the darkness was gathering, and somewhere out there, a ghost was preparing to walk through walls once again. Ward smiled. Then she disappeared into the light. The black sedan was waiting at the curb, engine running, windows tinted dark enough to hide whatever secrets waited inside. Ward slid into the back seat without hesitation, the door closing behind her with a soft click that sounded like the beginning of a new chapter. Where to, Commander? The driver was a woman Ward had never seen before. Young, professional, eyes that held the same quiet intensity that Ward recognized from her own reflection. The airport, private terminal. The sedan pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic with practiced ease. Ward watched the buildings of Washington slide past her window, monuments to power and ambition rising against the afternoon sky. Somewhere in those buildings, decisions were being made that would shape the course of nations. Somewhere in those halls, the remnants of Reese's network were scrambling to cover their tracks. They would fail. Her phone buzzed, a message from a number that did not exist, routed through servers that would never be traced. Olympus to Hades, first target confirmed Zurich, 48 hours. Authorization, unlimited. Ward deleted the message and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Zurich, a city of banks and secrets, where money flowed like water and loyalty could be purchased by the highest bidder. The perfect hunting ground for the first phase of her operation. The sedan stopped at a red light. Ward's eyes drifted to the sidewalk, where a young girl walked hand in hand with her father. The girl was laughing at something he had said, her face bright with the uncomplicated joy of childhood. The father looked down at her with an expression of pure love, the kind that needed no words. Ward felt something twist in her chest. She had been that girl once. She had walked beside her father, her small hand wrapped in his larger one, believing with absolute certainty that he would always be there. That belief had shattered on a spring morning 23 years ago, when 2 officers in dress uniforms appeared at their door with faces that told the story before their mouths could form the words. The light changed. The sedan moved forward. The girl and her father disappeared from view. Ward touched the medallion beneath her shirt, feeling its familiar weight against her skin. Honor, courage, commitment, the words her father had lived by, the words she had inherited along with his mission. The network that had corrupted Reese was older than she had initially believed. Her preliminary research had uncovered connections stretching back decades, tendrils of influence that reached into military commands across the globe. This was not a simple conspiracy of greed. This was something systematic, something patient, something that had been growing in the shadows while good people looked the other way. Her father had died fighting this darkness. She was certain of it now. His mission, the one that had never been officially acknowledged, had brought him too close to the truth. They had silenced him the only way they could. But they had made a mistake. They had left his daughter alive, and his daughter had spent 23 years becoming the weapon that would finally bring them down. The sedan turned onto a private road, passing through security checkpoints that required no identification. The driver knew where they were going. The guards knew who was in the back seat. In this world of shadows and secrets, reputation was the only currency that mattered. The private terminal appeared ahead, a sleek building of glass and steel that existed on no public map. A jet was waiting on the tarmac, its engines already warming for departure. Ward stepped out of the sedan and walked toward the aircraft without looking back. The wind caught her hair, pulling loose strands across her face. She did not brush them away. Zurich was waiting. The hunt was beginning. and somewhere in the darkness, her enemies were about to learn what it meant to be prey. The ghost of Thomas Ward smiled from wherever heroes go when their work is finally done. His daughter was carrying the torch now, and she would not stop until every shadow had been burned away. Thank you for walking this journey with Ward. If her story moved you, subscribe for more tales of silent heroes. A like helps us bring these legends to life.